Hello, this is Euan again. So in the past couple of videos, I've been showing you how to install OpenCRVS locally and how to start and stop OpenCRVS. So during this process, we have checked out the code from OpenCRVS core, and there is another repository checked out alongside this called the OpenCRVS country config repository. And what we need to do next is to configure this country config repository for your own country needs. So we're going to move forward into section 3.2 of our documentation, set up your own country configuration. And the first step of that is to fork this repository and create a new repository for your country. So the country config repository contains everything you need to configure OpenCRVS core for your needs. So at the moment, it is set up to use test data from our fake country called Farajaland. So if you take a little look at the country config repo, you can see inside the repository, there are a number of folders. There is a data seeding folder, and this folder contains CSV files for all of the locations, for example, in your country, administrative structure of your country. And it contains CSV files for things like the offices, civil registration offices where births and deaths occur, health facilities, health facilities where births and deaths occur, civil registration offices where births and deaths, etc., are registered. That's the difference. This is where the registration happens. Health facilities where a majority births and deaths happen. Of course, births and deaths happen at home as well, but where they happen in a hospital, we can take advantage of that by having metrics related to facilities and API integrations direct from those facilities. So that's why we create both of them. We also have a statistics file where you can add in population statistics, crude birth rate, etc. for each location. And this helps us to kind of create completeness rates, registration statistics in order to track the performance of OpenCRVS over time. So the data seeding folder also contains information on employees. This would be always test employees. So these are kind of fake users that you can create in order to test your installation. We never put real users in here. We always create real users in production via the Euan. We also can configure our certificates. So birth and death certificates, they can all be set up here. And in the country config server, you will also notice a folder called form. And in the form folder, this is where we configure the registration forms. And we do that with TypeScript, and that will be the subject of another video. You can also see a folder called API. And these are all of the endpoints which this server exposes and which you can customize. So, for example, it exposes an endpoint which has all of the application settings for initial setup. Again, that'll be a subject of another video. An endpoint to retrieve the configured certificates, an endpoint to retrieve text content. So all the text content for the entire application is in JSON. An endpoint to receive a business intelligence dashboard. This is powered by Metabase. Again, it'll be a subject of another video. And an integration point that you can integrate with if you want to do something synchronous at the point of registration, just before registration occurs. So some countries want to do that. They want to integrate with another system at the event when we think it's ready to be registered, but isn't registered yet. So you can synchronously interrupt the process there, do some other activities, and then continue with the registration. We do have an asynchronous way to do that as well, but again, subject to another video. You can also set up all fonts endpoints. These are all the fonts that will appear in your certificate. A notification endpoint. This allows you to integrate with an SMS service, or SMTP server, or WhatsApp, or some other method of communication which is needed for staff and beneficiary messaging. Again, the subject of another video. And finally, endpoint you can use if you want to customize what we call the tracking ID. So this is an application identifier, and some countries want to do that. You can customize the registration number itself in the event registration endpoint. Sorry, I never mentioned that, but you can do that there. So that's pretty much the options you have for configuration of OpenCRVS core. So it's very important that we make a copy of this, which is unique for you. And normally we would do that in a private repository. So you must have a GitHub organization. That's a requirement. So you must create an account on GitHub and create a GitHub organization that you can then create repositories in. So I'm going to make a new repository for this copy of country config server. So you would give it a name. I'm going to call this one OpenCRVS hyphen, so you could call it OpenCRVS hyphen Jamaica or whatever country you're working in. But actually what I'm going to do is call this OpenCRVS MOSIP, because I'm going to use this training as an example of eventually how we can connect with the modular open source identity platform. So that's MOSIP, the National ID system, another digital public good, and very much a close friend of OpenCRVS. And so I'm going to use this country configuration eventually to connect with MOSIP. So normally you would make this private. It's very important that it's private because you may have some things, some code in this repository, which is your IP, which you don't want to give to anybody else. Or it could be that you have API integrations that are really unique to your government and you don't want them out there. So normally you would choose private. But as I'm using this as a training tool, I'm making my repository public. Once again, you should make yours private. For the benefit of training, I am making mine public. So if it's private, you don't need to add a license or anything like that. You don't have to add a license. But for me, I'm just going to add an NPL license because that is the same license as OpenCRVS core, and because I'm making this public. So I have some extra tools like Renovate. Renovate is a good tool which keeps your repository up to date in terms of the dependencies. So I recommend Renovate. Renovate is a great tool. You can check it out at RenovateBot, and this will make sure that your repository will be up to date and can, if there's any 0-day vulnerabilities or anything like that, it will install them for you. So I recommend it that you have Renovate as part of your GitHub plugins. So that's me ready to make my repository. So I'll make my repository now. Okay, so I've got a repository, and you can get the URL for that by clicking here. So that's the URL. And I'm now ready to copy a country config directory locally and change the remote to be pointing to here rather than pointing to the previous our country config repository. So I'll be following the instructions in 3.2.1. Fork your own country config repository. So here I am in my country config repository. And the next step for me to do is to kind of change the name, I think, of this folder. So I'm going to just go back up a level and change the name of the folder. To the same name as my repository. So now I have changed the name of the folder. And if I type in git remote -v, you can see that the remote origin for this repository is set to our country config repo. So I need to change that. I need to change it to point to this new one. So what I need is the .git URL, which you can get by choosing the SSH option when you click on the code button. So click code, click SSH, and you can get the URL for that. So copy the URL to the clipboard. And now we need to change the remote. So we will type in this command, git remote set -URL, and we're going to change the origin remote to be ours. So set -URL origin, and you can paste that in. And then if you type git remote -v, we can see that the origin has changed. So it's now set to us. So now I can push. So I'm now pushing up all of the code to the remote, the new remote. Okay, it takes quite a long time to push your code up to GitHub, but now it has finished. And if you look at your repository, you'll probably see that a warning like this, perhaps, that master has had recent pushes. This is because the default branch on this new repository is called main. So what we need to do is to take a look at the master branch, and you can see all of the code. So it's up to you what you would like your default branch to be. Currently, our code by default is on the master branch, and therefore you may wish to change the name of your default branch to master. So you can do that in settings, the default branch section. You can edit by clicking this button here, these two arrows, switch to another branch. So you can click that button and change the default branch to be master and update. Okay, and then if you click back onto code, you'll notice that the code is all there. So you will notice that there is a red failing check, and that's simply saying that we're unable to build a Docker container. We have an action which will automatically publish code to Docker Hub when it is merged into master. And we have not set up Docker Hub yet. So that's why you have a red cross. But you can ignore that for now. We'll do that later. So it's very important that you protect your default branches. It's up to you what branching pattern you wish to use. But in this case, I'll be using a branch called master and a branch called develop. This is the Git flow branching pattern. So you can read all about what Git flow is on the internet. I won't talk too much about that, but it's a very common workflow. Been around for a long time. And so I will be doing that throughout these videos. So what I need to do is to protect the master branch from anybody pushing to it by mistake. And I'll also be creating a develop branch and protecting that. So I am going to check out another branch called develop and push that. Okay, so I now have two branches. I have three. I have main, master, and develop. And develop is just a copy of master. So I'm going to go into settings and protect these branches immediately. It's one of the most important security things you can do. So branches, add a branch protection rule. And the branch protection rule is set up like so. So you type in the name of the branch that you want to protect, i.e. master. And then you must select the following options. Require a pull request before merging, require approvals, require review from code owners. Then scroll down and check restrict who can push to matching branches. And you can deselect that option there unless you actually want to enable someone the ability to push there. I recommend you don't. So that's a branch protection rule for the master branch. And you'll probably be required to authenticate in some way. Let's just do that. And so now the master branch is protected, and I'm going to add a rule to protect the develop branch. Exactly the same checkboxes. And finally, I'm also going to protect the main branch. Okay, so our branches are now protected. And that is our repo setup. So the next thing we want to do is to decide how are we going to get new releases that we release. So if you look at the OpenCRVS country config repository, you can see that over time we introduce hotfixes and new code. So at the moment, there's only a couple of releases up here, but this will happen very often. And so we want to decide how are we going to get the code that we release on a regular basis from this repo into this repo. And that really is once again down to how your remotes are set up. So let's take a look at our remotes. So at the moment we have only one remote called origin, and it will pull code from our repository. This one we've created. But we want to periodically get updates from this repository when releases happen. So we want to make sure we have a remote also for this repository. And so let's do that. So once again, let's go to the code button of the country config, the OpenCRVS country config repo, make sure SSH is selected and copy the URL to the clipboard. And now we can create a new remote for this, for the OpenCRVS repo to collect updates. And so the command for that is git remote add, and then you can give the remote a name. You can call it anything you like. I'm going to give it the name Farajaland because that is such a unique name. I know when I'm pulling from Farajaland, I'm pulling from the OpenCRVS core team's default fictionalized country called Farajaland. So I'm going to call it Farajaland and paste in the git URL for our country config repo. So now if I type git remote -v, I can see that I have two remotes, origin and Farajaland. I can see that whenever I pull from Farajaland, I will be getting the latest changes on the develop branch, whatever branch I'm on, from the OpenCRVS team's repo. And normally I wouldn't do that. I just type git pull. So I'm only getting my teams, my country configurations updates. So I would do git pull Farajaland, whatever, at the point when I'm wanting to update the new release, which should probably be once every 6 months, something like that. Okay, so anyway, I am now ready to continue configuration. I'm going to use the develop branch for most of my development. And when I am satisfied with whatever I'm running on develop, then I will merge it into master and make my own releases for my own country. So in future videos, I'll be using the develop branch going forward. Thank you very much.